Hello and welcome to Lace Cottage and our spring sew along, where this time we're going to take a yoke dress and turn it into an heirloom. So, a couple things I want to let you know ahead of time what were the plans were, what we're going to do what week, some supplies you might want to gather so you can get it together ahead of time. So, week 1, which is this week, we're going to all about the yoke, joining the lace, inserting the lace panel into the fabric, gathering the lace edging for the sides. Let's see what else we doing this week. Yep, that's this week. Okay, so I'm reading off my notes. Okay, and then week 2, we're going to talk about gathering lace edging to entredo using the stabilizer. You don't have to if you don't want to, but it's so fast. And you'll use this technique for when you around the neck or for the sleeve band. And then if you're doing a fancy band, you'll use the same technique when you're putting the lace, gathered lace on the bottom. Third week is going to be all about the skirt, how to do the tucks, how to calculate your finish length, all that stuff. And then the fourth week, we're going to show you how you can take your regular yoke pattern and make it a slip. So, you know how hard it is to find a slip pattern nowadays. You can't, there's just not that many on the ground. So, anyway, so we'll get started on week 1 in just a few minutes. But I want to tell y'all about some supplies that you probably want to gather. First, it's going to be machine feet. Now, let's see, where's mine? Right here. All right, when you're doing lace work, I like to use, can you see this? A foot that's got a tunnel. Can you see that in the bottom? No, I'm not doing this very good. You see what I mean? You see the tunnel right there? And I like an open toe foot. That way you can see what you're doing. It makes it so much easier. Uh, some of those feet are clear, some are not. Just depends on what kind of machine you have. Let's see. And then when we're doing tucks, you probably will want a foot. Can you see this? It's got like a blade here on the side so you can move your needle over and get that way. Move your needle over that way so you can get your half-inch tuck, or if you decide you want a quarter-inch tuck. So it's all in the math. We'll cover that when we talk about the skirt. And then you probably want a quarter-inch foot. Most people have one. Because I say that because Children's Corner usually has a quarter of an inch seam allowance everywhere, and it's just real helpful to have. The other thing I want to talk about are threads. I put some on the web page, suggested threads, but I want to tell you what they were for. So this is a bigger spool of the 60 weight cotton thread. I use this for construction when I do heirloom. You can use 50 weight. Love Aurifil. Um, and Metler's okay too, but I like this one, especially when you're gonna trim down the entredo and you're gonna overcast that edge. You don't need a real fat thread there because it just adds bulk that you don't need. And when it comes to lace work, when you're joining your laces, um, Arfil has one. Whoops, sorry, on this wooden spool. I'm doing this. Yeah, can't tell. Or Arfil is an 80 weight thread, or Katana. Can you read that, or is it backwards? Sorry. Anyway, it's Madeira. Sometimes Madeira is hard to find, but normally we can get this one. Don't know why. But if you got this, that's fine. Or this, it's on the page, but this, like I said, is hard to find sometimes. Let's see. Oh, and sewing machine needles. Um, I like to use a 70 or a 10, however you grew up learning what those were. Um, some people like to do a 65 when they're doing lace work. You can. Those boogers are just hard to thread, and sometimes your automatic threaders. I'm pointing to my machine, and y'all can't see it. um, Sometimes those automatic threaders don't work on those tiny little holes. But I haven't had any trouble with 70, 10, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, and then the other thing is when it comes time to mark our tucks, you might want a 6 or a 6.5, or I think it comes 6.5 by 24.5 ruler, or 6 by 24, something like that. You're going to need that long distance because it just a little bit, you'll appreciate it. You don't have to have it, but it's helpful. Okay, here we go. Week one. Um, Open up your lace package and take out your insertion, not your edging. The because we're going to starch it. But first, I want to talk to y'all about Maline has a side to it that has the knots. I'm a knots up kind of girl. I like that. If you can, you see it. Wait, let me get there right. You see that? You see that? That's the knots. I mean, some people know about this and some don't, and but I like the knots. I think it gives it extra kick. Um, it just gives it more interest. But it's okay if you don't like it that way. You can just turn it over and do it the other way. A lot of people like it the smooth side too, and that's fine. But that's I started joining that. I'll get to that in a minute. Um, yeah, but the French val lace, like this one that we're using in the kit, you have to look really hard to see a difference in this one. Um, just pick a side you like the best, and sometimes you can just write a little R on there, or you could put a pin in it. Just keep going the way you start, and you'll be fine. It won't matter. So get your insertion out, starch it, press it. Well, let it dry first. Sorry, because if you try to iron it when it's wet, it just you have a tendency to stretch it. Number one, and number two, you just get starch on your iron, and your iron needs a little love. So, um, yeah, let it dry. It won't take long. And while it's drying, we're going to talk about the pattern piece. So just starch it, let it dry, hang it over a plastic coat hanger or something. When you starch it, did I talk about the silicone thing? Or do it on plastic. Don't starch on your ironing board. It just gets ooky all over the place. Um, your ironing board doesn't need any more starch. Let's see. Let me lay that down. Okay, so get your pattern pieces together while that's drying. I like to do this. I started doing this a long time ago, and it saved me a lot of headache. I get out my pattern piece. Can you see that? I get out my pattern piece and I go put it in the copier, printer, whatever. And I'll copy one face down like this, and then I'll turn it over and copy it that way. And then I'll cut them out and put them together. And then I've got a whole piece. See, that's that. Wait, that that one's right side up, and this one's right side down. Anyway, or vice versa. Anyway, so I do this, and it helps me when I'm wanting to visualize how much room I'm taking up, making a lace section. Yeah, it's just something I like to do, and then I keep it because every time you use this, you poke a hole in it. You poke a hole in it. So gather your pieces. Don't cut anything out, not yet. Um, don't cut your skirt out anyway. If you really want to, you can cut your sleeve out, but you really don't need to, not yet. When you gather your pieces, let's see, you don't need a collar. I don't normally ever cut out my bias strip. I normally measure it, and I'll write on my sleeve pattern. I'll write on my sleeve pattern. What I do, what the cut length is. Can you see that? What the cut length is and what the finish length is. And then that way, when I'm cutting my bias for my piping and all that other stuff, it's right there. I don't have to go digging for it. You're going to need that measurement next week when we talk about gathering lace to the entree band that we're going to make for the sleeve. Let's see what else we need to do. We need to show you how to join your laces using the stabilizer. But first, if you really want to do something else in between while that's drying, you can, now that we've got this handy dandy thing, take a ruler. Where's my ruler? And measure. Whoops, upside down. Measure, and you measure it. Okay. Whoops, that's not very straight, is it? I need my big ruler. Uh, yeah. Anyway, lay it down and measure it right. And you want to cut a piece of fabric. Make sure it's straight. we covered when we did the Olivia how to straighten fabric. Make sure it's straight. Um, a piece of fabric, I'd go an inch all the way around. So measure this way, measure it this way, and add an inch and cut you a square of the batiste. Press it, starch it. Well, starch it, let it dry a little bit, and press it. Make sure it's straight. And then you can set that aside and it'll be ready to go after you make your lace panel, because we're going to use this bad boy when we do that. Let's see. Okay, we're going to pause and we'll get to the sewing the laces together. This is the fun, easy thing. You know, before I started using this stabilizer, my stomach would almost be in knots because I would get so nervous about sewing the laces together. And I thought, oh Lord, I can't miss, or I have to go back. This stuff, I tell you, it's been a lifesaver. I do a lot of lace work and a lot of heirloom work. It's been a lifesaver. It really has. So I hope y'all enjoyed as much as I do, and we'll get started again in just a sec. Okay, y'all ready? All right, find your water soluble stabilizer. It's either in a package that says stabilizer, or it's in with your lace for your dress kit. Take out your stabilizer, cut you a piece about 5 inches wide, and then remember when I asked y'all to measure this and cut a piece of fabric? The measurement that you cut your fabric this way, cut your stabilizer that deep too. All right, so after you get your stabilizer cut, mark the center. It's just a guide for later on, and set that aside. And then the fabric that you cut for your front yoke, mark the center of that piece too. Make sure first that it's straight on grain. You've pressed it, starched it. It's going to need the starch, otherwise when you do the zigzag on the side to put the lace in it, it's going to pucker. So if you starch it, it's good. So set that aside for a second after you mark that. Oh, I said mark the center of that, right? Okay, so that'll help us later. Then get out your lace package, and that edging that I told you not to starch earlier, cut off a half a yard, because I allowed 9 inches to gather here and 9 inches to gather here. The other 2 yards is for the neck and the sleeves, but the 9 inches here, then you can decide how much gather you want on the side. So we're just about ready to join our laces. So thread up your sewing machine with the 80 weight thread. Either, well, I don't see mine right now, but I showed it to you earlier. It's on the wooden spool, the Aurifil, or the katana. I probably said that wrong. The Madeira. Anyway, one of those two. Thread it top and bottom. Get your stabilizer out, and your center piece, which is that wide one with the like this in the center, and the boy lace insertion, the one with the rectangles. We're going to lay those down. So when you get ready to join the lace, if you lay them side by side, they're going to fight to want to go and do this anyway. So you might as well just lay them side by side. Oh, excuse me. One on top of the other. The headers on these are real tiny, so you can just zigzag and set your machine to zigzag just over the header, just over it. When you're joining laces, it does not need to be a satin stitch by any stretch of the imagination. Probably a 2 would be long enough, but it'll depend on your machine how wide you need to go. You can adjust it a little bit. So you're going to zigzag over, lay the headers over each other, and then you'll do one, and then you'll come back, and you'll just keep building either side, one side to the other. And then when it comes time to, after we've done our lace panel, we've washed the stabilizer away, okay, and then we've let it dry, and we've starched it and pressed it again. Remember, let it dry in between for the starch. Press it, make sure it's good and straight, and you lay it down on your fabric. You will tighten up that zigzag this way, almost a satin, not quite, but almost a satin stitch. And you're still just going to go over the header back and forth, and back and forth. And then after that, you'll take that 9 inches and you'll see the pictures where I've laid it down on the board. I call it a pokey board or oh, what are they called? The heirloom, whatever. Anyway, just something to poke into. You can see, and you gather up your lace edging after you've done that. You'll see it. It's fun. Um, you'll gather your lace edging and distribute it like you want it. At the very top, you don't have to put any gather up there because you'll see it's just going to pretty much get eaten up by the seam allowance, but it's got to be there. Otherwise it'd look funny. So it's got to go all the way up to the top. So you'll see it. Uh, yeah. So up next are going to be pictures about that and some where we talked about laying the lace over like this and then zigzagging it. So let's have fun. Okay. Okay, now that we've got the lace panel zigzagged to the fabric, take it over to the pinning board, lay it over the front yoke that we've copied, trace around it just to give you an idea of where the neckline will be. The next picture shows that we've gathered the lace, we've pinned it around, and we've kind of smoothed out the gathers where we need it, and then you can pin it down and take it. The next video is going to be taking it over to the sewing machine and zigzagging over the header of the edging right on top of where you just sewed it to the fabric. So you don't need a tight zigzag like you did when you sewed the lace to the fabric. You can stretch it out probably like a 2. You might even be able to go a little bit more than 2. You'll just have to see. Okay, so after you have zigzagged on my mess there, after you've zigzagged both sides, that line I told y'all to draw in the center of your fabric. Be sure and stick your fingers in here. Don't cut through your lace panel. We're going to cut this fabric right here. I always stick my fingers in there, make sure, just to get it open. And then I always make sure I've got the lace side up when I do this. One time I didn't. I'll never do it again. I cut my lace. I was horrified. Anyway, so make sure you don't have strong magnification on when you do this because you'll cut too close. So just trim it about, can you see how close I'm getting? You trim it about like that. You can always go back and trim more, but if you cut it too close. So I'm holding it. See, I'm holding it like this. Holding this out of the way. Go ahead and trim it all the way up. You don't have to, I guess. I'm just going to just get it out of the way. The reason I sew this all the way up is so that it's got some stability. See, that's pretty. Okay. Again, just kind of rub it with your fingers. Get it out of the way. Make sure your finger's in there. You're not cutting too much. Sorry, the light's not too great. Got a bad angle. There we go. But y'all can see what I'm talking about. You can see about that much. You're going to have a slip under it too, so. Then, all that you did earlier, isn't that pretty? It's going to be great. Okay. So the next step after this, after you've got it trimmed, you would want to go in and put your Swiss trim at the bottom. Okay, so now we're ready to attach our Swiss beading. It's not beading, it's Swiss insertion, sorry, to the bottom of the yoke. Now, as you'll notice, sometimes Swiss trim, the selvage is pretty equal on either side, and sometimes it's not. So you have to look at each piece and decide, and look at it and decide. So there is a right side and a wrong side to this. So anyway, all right, so now that we've traced this on here, there's a couple different ways you can do this. This is the way I'm going to show you. And then we may touch on the other one. Okay, so as you'll notice, this trim is 1/4 of an inch. Now, if we just add this on here, if we just sew it on, you're going to extend the yoke by 1/4 of an inch. Well, excuse me, let me do it this way. If you do it this way, because this side's, if you just do it like that, do you see what I mean? So, and you can do that. And you would then have to take off the 1/4 of an inch to the arm template here at the top. You can absolutely do that, and that's an easy fix too. Or if you don't want to extend the yoke, you can, instead of this being a 1/2 inch here, this is a 1/2, you can go up from the edge and make it 3/4, and just draw you a line. And then this way, you will essentially be putting this at the bottom of the yoke and not extending the yoke, and you don't have to make any adjustment to the underarm. And so you would sew right sides together. Nope, this one. Sew right sides together. This just so happened this worked out to about a 1/2 an inch, so you'll have a 1/2 inch seam allowance to sew your skirt to. So I would pin it and sew it right across there, and then that way when you fold it down, see what happens? It's like magic. Like that. And then you can sew your skirt to this. Do the same thing for the back. Whatever adjustment you did here, make sure you do it to the back and it'll match up fine. And your arm's eye won't be too large, because if your arm's eye is too large, it may not seem like much, but it'll take a little poof out of your sleeve because that sleeve's got to stretch further. Okay, so here we go. After you've sewn it down, this is a different one I worked on. After you've sewn it, straight stitched it down, right sides together, okay? Sew it down. And then trim it close like you did the front here, about the same distance. And then go back to your sewing machine, and you want to sew, you want to do a zigzag, and it's going to make that wrap over. You want to hit here. Can you see that? Am I too far away? Okay, you want to hit here and go off the edge. And when that thread wraps back around this way, it'll wrap it around and it'll keep it from raveling out. That will help finish that edge. See how that works? And if you get a little finger there, you can just trim it off. But now when you hit the lace bit here, it's going to get a little wobbly because it's lace and it's not fabric. Okay? So, and then you can press it this way. And there you go. Okay, y'all. Guess what? We just did week 1. That was a lot. I know that. So, but next week, we are going to do gathered lace edging to entredo. And this is going to be our sleeve band and our neck finish. So if you want to go ahead and get a head start for next week, you can go ahead and cut out your back yokes and your back yoke lining, and be sure and mark your fold line and your center back. Dig out your pattern piece for your sleeve band and get that measurement, the cut length. We'll need both of those for next week. And I tell you what, I'll look forward to seeing y'all next week. If you have any questions, if I've glossed over something you didn't understand, please reach out through the Facebook group or call the shop. We'll be glad to help you any way we can. We want this to be fun. We want everybody to get finished and enjoy it. So thank you for listening. And we love our customers. So call us anytime. Thanks.